What's up guys, it's the Horror Wombat, and I just went and saw this little independent movie you may have heard of called Peter Pan's Neverland Nightmare. Directed by Scott Chambers and produced by him and Reese Frake Waterfield, the two guys who brought you the Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey movies. Also known as the start of the Twisted Childhood saga. And the newest addition to this franchise is Peter Pan's Neverland Nightmare. And this movie follows the relationship between siblings Wendy and Michael. And one day Michael heads home from school unnoticed until he comes face to face with the evil Peter Pan, a former circus performer turned child kidnapper. Peter kidnaps Michael, and as soon as Wendy finds out, sets out on a mission to save her brother from the clutches of Peter Pan. So about 2 months ago, I made a video giving my first initial thoughts about Peter Pan's Neverland Nightmare, and if you've seen that video, you'll know that I wasn't exactly very kind to it, even going as far as to say it might be the worst movie to come out of the Twisted Childhood universe. But when I saw that it was playing in select theaters, I was like, you know what? I kinda wanna go see this movie. And that's what I did earlier this week. Now, the closest theater showing this movie from my college dorm was about 30 minutes away, which meant having to drive all that way in the icy cold snow just to go see this movie. Now, I'm originally from Los Angeles, so we don't get snow there. Instead, we unfortunately get destructive wildfires. So it was a little nerve-wracking for me to have to drive a good amount in the snow and ice just to go see a movie. But man, I was totally ready to trash on this movie. Seriously, when it comes to Peter Pan's Neverland Nightmare, I was expecting the worst of the worst. But when I walked out of the movie, all I could think was, that honestly wasn't that bad. Now, don't get me wrong, this movie isn't a masterpiece or anything, but for being one of those public domain fairy tale horror movies, it could have been way worse. There was actually quite a bit to enjoy in this movie. For one, Martin Portlock's portrayal as Peter Pan. Although you could tell the character was heavily inspired by characters like Joaquin Phoenix as the Joker or Ethan Hawke as the Grabber, Portlock managed to deliver an unsettling performance as Peter Pan, and I think he did a pretty good job as the character. I would love to see him in many more horror movies from here on out. Let's talk about the character of Tinkerbell. And this is where we enter my first flaw with the movie. I didn't think Tinkerbell in this movie was really all that fleshed out. She's just some random woman that Peter kidnapped, I guess, and he injects her with something called pixie dust, which is actually just heroin. She's mostly just kinda there, and she doesn't really add too much to the plot. She does show a bit more empathy towards the kids compared to Peter, but that side plot ultimately just goes nowhere. Another character in this movie that hardly gets fleshed out is Captain Hook. If you saw the trailer, you know that Captain Hook is being held hostage by Peter Pan just like Wendy's brother Michael. But aside from a moment towards the very end, Captain Hook just does nothing other than just be there. I feel like they could have done more with the character, but maybe he'll be a lot more involved in the upcoming Pooniverse movie, so who knows. Also, I just gotta point this out, I think it's hilarious that Captain Hook is played by a drag queen. Quite the interesting casting choice, I must say. There's lots of little Easter eggs to Peter Pan thrown throughout this movie as well. Wendy has a friend in this movie named Tiger Lily, and there's also a pretty subtle homage to the crocodile in this movie. You'll notice it once you see the film. And while we're talking about Easter eggs, it's obvious the filmmakers decided to get a little meta because one of the characters in this movie is wearing a Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey shirt, because of course they are. Another thing I want to talk about is this movie's idea of Neverland. In my original video, I just assumed that this shot of a bus in the countryside was going to be the filmmaker's portrayal of Neverland. Actually, it's not, and I'm just a dumbass for assuming so. Basically what happens is that the main reason Peter Pan is kidnapping all these kids is because he wants to take them off to Neverland, which is just a fancy way of saying he wants to kill them. While I think this concept is a cool idea, I'm a little disappointed that we weren't able to get a physical portrayal of Neverland in this movie. There's lots of times in this movie where Peter Pan's saying he wants to take these kids to Neverland, and the whole time I was just expecting them to actually, go to Neverland. But when I eventually realized what the filmmakers were trying to go for, I was like, aw man. But I guess they didn't have the budget to pull something like that off anyways. But easily the biggest criticism I have for this movie is that it just mostly lacks creativity. Not only are there plenty of horror movie cliches such as jump scares, but man does this movie steal a lot from other movies. That was my biggest worry after originally seeing the trailer for this movie, how they were essentially just ripping off from so many other movies. Like, do y'all remember that scene in the trailer where Peter talks to a little kid from beneath a cellar? I mean, obviously it was just a carbon copy of the opening from It, but having seen the movie now, not only is it just copying that scene, but they even had the audacity to copy some of the dialogue from that scene too. It was pretty blatant, to be honest. There's quite a few movies this film copies from, but I would say the one it borrows from the most is definitely Terrifier 2. They both involve a brother and sister duo. The brother gets kidnapped by the killer at one point. The sister has a friend that gets murdered pretty brutally, and there's also a sort of sidekick to the main killer. I mean, hell, there's even a scene where Peter Pan is walking around a costume store and a worker tells him to stop f***ing around. Just like in, you guessed it, Terrifier 2. So, to be honest, if there was more originality put into this movie, I think it could have been a pretty great horror movie. But it was obvious that the whole Peter Pan storyline was added just to get more seats in the theater. And I mean, it obviously worked because I ended up going quite a bit out of the way just to go see this thing. But despite all of that, I didn't hate this movie. It had a great lead performance, it wasn't super boring like Blood and Honey was, and there were some pretty good practical effects in this movie. It ain't Terrifier levels of gory, but it has a good enough amount for me to enjoy, because I do love me some good practical effects in my horror movies. In the end, this is a massive step up from Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, and it's great to see the Twisted Childhood Universe guys improve their craft with new installments. And if this movie didn't end up being bad, then I'm really intrigued to see what they do with Pinocchio Unstrung, because now that movie has even more potential than it already did for me. So yeah, overall, while I don't think Peter Pan's Neverland Nightmare is anything special, I can definitely see it becoming a cult classic in the near future. Normally this is the part of the video where I would recommend if you see this movie or not, and I gotta be honest, I'm leaning towards the recommend side. It's not a great movie by any means, but it's nothing offensive either. I think horror fans will definitely get a kick out of this one. So yeah, if you saw Peter Pan's Neverland Nightmare, let me know what you thought of it. Did you enjoy it, or do you think it could have used a little more pixie dust? Of course I had to throw in a bad pun in this video. Anyways, let me know your thoughts about the movie in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and hit that subscribe button for more videos like this. But yeah, that's all I got for you guys today. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.